What is not a bullet you dodged, but a huge tactical nuke you dodged? My manager was trying to have me fired for underperformance, and I was so depressed at the time that I believed I was an awful employee. The place I work has a whole song and dance routine just to get someone a verbal warning, let alone fired, so she tried to get me to take a severance payment so that I'd leave and save her the trouble. I had to take sick leave shortly after that conversation, and while I was gone, she initiated the formal process to have me fired. I was able to drag things out for a couple of months, and during that time, I discovered she'd falsified documents to make me look like a lost cause. Presenting a dossier to HR demonstrating her statements were provably misleading, and documenting every time she failed to follow proper procedures turned everything around. I got moved to a better job on a better team, and spent a solid year rubbing it in her face how well I was doing, and ensuring it got back to her whenever I got praise from the department head. It was pretty annoying that she didn't get fired, but there would have been too much blowback on management if she had. Still, I went from the verge of unemployment to unequivocal success. I quit a job after my boss yelled at everybody for faking being sick when one guy came in with the flu and passed it around the office. He claimed that people don't get sick by being near each other. One guy got it so bad he was hospitalized for 2 weeks. I quit with no backup in October 2019. By February 2020, his company went out of business. This happened before cell phones existed. I had a long commute home, and on a rare occasion my husband drove into the city to meet me. I started for home about 15 minutes before he did. On the stretch of Highway 101 that I needed to be on for about 20 miles, there was a big rig in front of me that seemed to be driving erratically. I got this weird feeling and just moved over to the next lane and accelerated past him. In my rear view mirror, I saw the big rig run over the car in front of him, flip to its side, crushing the cars in the next lane, where I had just been. My husband was behind the accident, and as the police were letting cars file past in single file, he saw one of the crushed cars had a red bumper. He got home a couple of hours after me and said he'd never been so happy to see my red car in the driveway. That he'd been holding his breath as he turned down our street because he really expected me to be under the big rig. Was chatting with a woman at the bar, nothing flirtatious, just casual banter. I told her I needed to head out and she asked if I could give her a ride. I was headed that way, so it wasn't a big deal. We pull into her driveway and I can see a guy at a computer in the living room through the window. I ask who it is and she replied, "That's my husband, he's a pansy. I'll bring him outside and you scare him off, then we can have the house all to ourselves for the night." Every alarm bell in my head was ringing and all I could think was, how do I get this crazy out of my truck without a big scene? So I said sounds good. As soon as she was halfway to the door I put it gear and burned rubber. Almost wound up in the I-35 Watts Bridge collapse in Minneapolis years ago. My uncle, cousin, and I were on our way to a Twins game. We were originally planning to take the route that crossed the bridge, but last minute decided to take a more scenic route. After it happened, we were talking and we figured it probably would have been within a couple minutes of the time the bridge collapsed that we would have been on the bridge. I used to work for a drainage company. Drove 5-ton trucks with the roll-off bins, used to move machine or material with them. One day, I was super tired. I pulled up to a job, tilted the bed up, got out, opened the dump gates. Got back in cab, roll forward slowly. Nice dump, great. Get out of the cab, go back and close dump chutes. Oh, crap, still a bunch of sand in there. Dumbass me unlatched the gate of the roll-off bin. About half a yard of sand still in there, and the bin was still on an angle. That door opened so fast. The latch got catapulted into my cheek so hard it broke my orbital and knocked me to the ground. Blacked out briefly. The gate itself swung out, somehow missed me, and just had clearance over my steel toe boot. Dented the steel, scraped all the fabric off the boot. I ended up with just a small scar under my right eye. but could have easily lost my toes and an eye if I'd been standing about 1 inch to the left. Do not operate heavy equipment while tired, drunk, or under the influence of drugs. Ugh. Dated a woman who was physically and emotionally abusive. Got caught in the cycle of abuse, gaslighting, etc., not sure how I was going to leave, afraid to leave, etc. One day a neighbor witnessed one of her violent outbursts and called the police. She was arrested, charged with domestic violence/assault. I was granted a restraining order. Luckily my dilemma took care of itself. If it hadn't, who knows? A buddy of mine told me if I had stayed with her much longer I'd be dead. He wasn't kidding. Unintentionally made someone else dodge a literal bullet. I performed in a drag party, a street away from a local LGBTQ center. The show went great and I felt like I was on fire. So I decided to get brave and flirt with this girl I liked. We seemed to click, but I was too nervous to ask for her number just yet. She was planning to go to the LGBTQ center after the party to say hi, and I kept finding excuses to keep her there just a bit longer, until it feels right to ask. The party wrapped up, and I kept chatting with her. Her friends already left and headed there. And I kept trying to find the right timing to ask for her number. We kept chatting for 30, 40 minutes, before I finally got the courage. She giggled and gave me her number. I was so happy I couldn't contain myself. Then the phone calls began. Frantic friends calling, and sounding extremely relieved as soon as I picked up. She was getting those calls, too. Everyone who was still in the club got them. As it turned out, a shooter walked into the LGBTQ center nearby, shot at all directions, and fled. 2 people were killed on the spot. Many others were injured. She dodged it, because I was too nervous to ask for her number. I was driving home from visiting my brother in Vermont when a snowstorm started. I didn't have much experience driving in serious snow and I completely lost control. Car careened off the road and I was heading for a giant boulder at around 50 or 60 miles per hour. I felt time slow down and I reflected on my life for a moment and then said goodbye to my body. Suddenly, I was jolted out of it by an abrupt impact, but I could see that the boulder was still 20 or 30 feet away. When I got out of the car, I saw that I had hit a little skinny tree that I could have easily grabbed with one hand. However, it had a giant root system that lifted the car off the ground and stopped me. Car was totaled, but I was completely fine because of that little tree. There is no way I would have survived the other impact. Yesterday I was helping my fiance's dad cut some tree limbs from his yard. He was on a lift trying to cut some limbs that were dangling dangerously high over a steel propane tank. The tank itself had $1,500 worth of propane. He cut off a limb and it hit the tank with the largest bang I've ever heard. Propane came pouring out the top like smoke from a mortar. He struggled to get the lift down enough to jump out, run for his life. We would later find out that the limb hit the gas valve and it fell straight down into the tank. If it had sparked once, it wouldn't have mattered how far we ran. We would be dead. Him, me, and my fiancé who was showering inside, unaware. Now he has no gas, is out $1,500, and almost died. Big twist is that I saw him smoking up there. There's no way we should be alive, let alone could. The gas is still leaking out even after 24 hours. Edit, he's getting it taken care of by professionals. We're only stupid with power equipment. Came up shy of our financial goal for a wedding and decided to save again for another year. We were gonna go on an adventure and elope. Relationship fell apart in the following year. Both of us put nails in the coffin. I was the only one to acknowledge mine. She could do no wrong, and I was being gaslit pretty bad. When we split, my depression evaporated. I was able to go off my meds, and realize just how deep she had her claws in me. I thank God every day we didn't get married. My mental health would have been horrendous. Well, not as bad as the others, But I really wanted to move into a small apartment. It was close to my girlfriend's place and also quite big for the price. Seemed great, but the landlord didn't want a student but only workers. Since we were already in touch with the previous renter, we later found out that the landlord began to bully this poor soul out of the apartment because he needed it for himself, which began with unfriendly treatment and ended with full-out renovations starting in his bath without him being warned, so he had no bathroom for 3 months. I moved into another apartment that I still live in today, and only a few weeks after moving my previous place caught fire and nearly burned down. Broke my belly button overeating at a company lunch, went from an innie to an outie, hernia. Put off going to the doctor for a few weeks before going to see a specialist. Hernia doc said yep, it's a hernia, we're in a pandemic, we can schedule you for whenever, if you want to wait a bit there shouldn't be any problems, no hurry. I decided to get it out of the way, they had a cancellation so I scheduled for a week later. I wake up from surgery and the doc says there was a complication, they didn't get to the hernia when they were going in, they noticed my appendix was about to explode so they took that out instead, still not the tactical nuke. I asked about when they could fix the hernia, he said the appendix looked funny and was going to send it to the lab and get back to me. The lab was really backed up from the pandemic, so several weeks later I get a call from the doc. It was a really rare appendix cancer, something that happens to around 1,000 Americans a year. Not only that, but of the 2 kinds of appendix cancer based on lab work, I had the worst of the 2, the kind that spreads everywhere really fast and cuts your lifespan down considerably even with treatment. The first kind grows slow and stays put, but every once in a while it will go into overdrive, differentiates, pokes out of the abdominal wall and spits cancer slime everywhere that turns whatever it touches into more cancer. The cutoff for it turning from good into the bad kind is 1 centimeter tumor, mine is 1.5 centimeters. Under the microscope it had differentiated and they saw the cells that spit cancer slime had formed. There's really only one treatment referred to as the mother of all surgeries, which is its own ball of tactical nukes. I stew over that for a few weeks till they can get more tests scheduled, still in pandemic so it takes a while. Go in for a barrage of scans, pokings and proddings, and the scans are all clean, no signs of cancer spread, mostly. It had just turned from the slow-growing kind that stays put into the fast-moving kind and hadn't had a chance to spit cancer slime outside the wall holding my appendix. If I had waited just a week for the hernia surgery, literally every day that I waited would have exponentially increased the odds of it spreading the mucin. They think they got it all when they took the appendix out. There's a few things they want to keep an eye on that they're reasonably sure is just scaring from the surgery, but they gave me an 80% chance of being cancer-free. I have more scans in December to make sure. Back when I was a physics major, I was in quite a romance with a fellow physics major starting when I was a teenager, and he was always talking about marriage and the like. I was rather infatuated, so didn't mind the marriage talk, but was definitely a bit unenthusiastic when he kept talking about how we'd be having our first kids by the time we were in grad school and stuff when I was, like, 20 years old. Oh, and I was dealing with sexual harassment from a professor at the time, and when I told him, he was like, that sucks, but it's going to happen to women in physics. Anyway, when we broke up it was because he chose another girl who was an artist, and got to hear his reasons. It turns out he really liked that she doesn't know what I'm talking about when I get back at the end of the day, and had the chutzpah to add in, and she's even a good cook. 20-year-old me was really devastated because I really liked this guy, and shouldn't have hung back. Now that I'm in my 30s and a professional astronomer, while he kept to the schedule we discussed and has 3 kids, last I checked, I'm just relieved it didn't happen. You don't know everything about yourself at that age, and holy Batman, we were just so incompatible, and he was kind of an asshole with traditional attitudes. I'm not sure I would have had the rich life and career I have had if we stuck together, that's for sure. I went to summer camp between my junior and senior years of high school, and became friends with a group of guys. I'm a girl. I dated one of the guys in the group. It was both of our second relationships ever, and so we were a little handsy with each other, but I flat out refused to have sex with him, because I sure as fuck wasn't losing my virginity to a summer fling I'd only known for a couple of weeks. He was a little pushy about it, but ultimately backed down after I repeatedly refused. We broke up when summer camp was over and remained friends, though he lived in another state. After the breakup, not only did he start to emotionally abuse me, threatening to commit suicide if I stopped talking to him, saying he'd never had anyone understand him except for me, that sort of thing, but I found out from one of the other guys in the group that he'd made jokes about raping me in my sleep. I blocked him on all social media and haven't talked to him since.
I done dug into my bag of tricks, came up with some different skits, not your average mafia, I be on some different shit, you know I'm pimping shit, that make you use your mind, so if you can fill in the blanks, do it when it's time, come on, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, feel like I'm in hell, but I wish I wasn't, yeah you got it, now knock it, while I rock it, I stick plugs in the socket, and money in my, yo I get psychotic when you try to diss my staff, no props for your block, so you